Good evening. Welcome to our weekly Beat the Press edition of Greater Boston. Our topics: WHDH just says no to Leno and NBC. Governor Patrick says he got hammered. By whom? And strange bedfellows, the Hartford Courant and WTIC merge newsrooms. Joining me are Dan Kennedy of Northeastern University, television commentator Callie Crosley, Joe Shaka of the Boston Herald, and Kara Miller of Metro West Daily News. First, Ed Anson, the owner of WHDH, has long been a maverick when it comes to programming his station's newscasts. Now Anson is making his boldest move yet, expanding his news coverage potentially at the expense of his NBC affiliation.
Now on 7.
It wasn't the top story, but it was the story that would generate the most media attention.
We have an exciting announcement that we'd like to share with you this evening. Beginning in September, you'll be able to watch 7 News at 10 right here on Channel 7.
Left unsaid was what you will not be able to watch at 10.
And now, Jay.
Saddled with declining primetime ratings, NBC announced in December that Jay Leno would be moving to 10 p.m. weeknights.
We'll try it. We'll try it and see. I mean, I hope it's a success.
But HDH's Anson was not about to pin his chances on hope, telling the Boston Globe, "We don't think the Leno show is going to be effective in prime time. It will be detrimental to our 11 o'clock. Emerson College's Paul Niwa understands Anson's angst.
Stations right now are looking at what's making them money and what's not. And the number one revenue driver for local stations is their news. And so they're going to put news as a priority over what network is trying to shovel to them.
WHDH has tried to stem the ratings decline at 11 with personnel moves. But in the latest ratings book, they come in third.
Here in Boston, Fox 25's 10 o'clock show is extremely strong. It's gaining momentum. And at the same time, Channel 7 has been having a hard time at 11 o'clock. So it's only natural that they would want to get into the time slot, which is really the prime time slot now for evening news.
Meanwhile, Anson's aggressive move has ruffled the feathers of the Peacock network. In a statement to Beat the Press, NBC President John Eck said, WHDH's move is a flagrant violation of the terms of their contract with NBC. If they persist, we will strip WHDH of its NBC affiliation. Anson claims his NBC contract gives him options. Jay Leno banned in Boston? Send in the lawyers. Of course, you and I, Callie, still turn to Channel 7 to catch CBS in 60 Minutes, so I never got over that switch. When was it, 15 years ago, whenever it is. But I have to say, this is a bold move, and I hand it to Ed Anson for him. He is a maverick. I mean, he's got guts, and he's gambling. He's the gamble. He's thinking. We discussed the Jay Leno move back in December when they announced it. I happen to think it could be a good move, but he's right about the fact that it will kill their 11 o'clock newscast. And what he would like to do is put Jay Leno on at 11, which I think would be a brilliant strategic move because it would go up against the other newscasts. I really fail to see why NBC is so reluctant.
Well, because NBC wants to have a big hit with Jay Leno, and Boston's the 7th biggest media market in the country. If Leno's not on here, then his national ratings are going to take a significant hit. Now, Ed Anson also owns Channel 56, and he does a newscast at 10 now that is not done well in the ratings. His first dream may be to put Leno on at 11. My suspicion is that the compromise that he'll reach with NBC is he'll put Leno on at 10 on 56, and he'll have the news on Channel 7 at 10 o'clock. But we'll see where this goes.
I mean, NBC's back up against the wall here because I'm sure they're worried about the other NBC affiliates saying, well, wait a minute, we're going to back off of 10 o'clock Leno as well. They can't have that kind of revolt among general managers across the country who want to preserve their own 11 o'clock. It would be nice to have for us, but I'm not so sure for NBC. But Anson's contract, I think, is probably a little bit different because he's an independent station and not a owned and operated, NBC affiliate. So he may have some wiggle room here, and so it certainly would be a major protracted legal battle, which I'm sure both sides want to avoid. But I guess the big question is, what else is Channel 7 supposed to do? Sort of sit there and take one for the team for NBC and say, we'll stay here at 11, even though we think that we're going to have a very weak lead-in. Our news is already in third place. We're already suffering. We're just going to sit here and take it. What are they supposed to do?
Well, I think the loss of an NBC affiliation is no small thing. So, bold move though it may be, that's something really to think about, even with not strong shows on NBC. Having a network affiliation still matters to the people that watch. And after all, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about the demographic of people who are watching news at this hour, who cannot stay awake until 11 o'clock. That's your baby boomers. So in some ways, it's a smart move. And I'm not sure how I feel about the Leno at 10, but I recognize that chasing the demographic is probably good for Leno's show. Having sat in that live audience at Jay Leno, those people are rabid Leno fans. I mean, there's a reason why the guy's ratings are up. People keep talking about him, but his ratings are up. That's just a fact of life.
I mean, one of the things Ed Anson has going for him is that if he doesn't air Leno and instead airs an hour and a half of news, nobody's ever going to be able to know how well Leno would have done. So nobody will ever be able to do the comparison. And I think, well, one thing is I think he will do well with the 10 o'clock newscast because, as you suggest, 10 is the new 11. People get up earlier and they cannot wait to hear the weather, and that's why Fox 25 is regularly pulling in 200,000 viewers at 10 o'clock. One of the strange, I think, knock-on effects of this may be that the 11 o'clock newscasts on 4 and 5 really, really suffer because by that time everybody already knows what the weather's going to be tomorrow. And so I wonder if this could lead to possibly one of those being axed in favor of like an entertainment program or something that at that time people would rather see.
Well, that's a good point because that is what is happening right now. People of the baby boomer generation are now watching Fox 25 at 10. That's what people are doing. But I'm interested, Dan, you've studied this more closely than I have, what the options are. It used to be, back when NBC made the switch to CBS 4, whatever. No, when they went over to Channel 7, that was when NBC was really at the top of its game. ER and all those top-rated shows, there was a dozen of them, St. Elsewhere, all those programs, whatever they were, that was driving prime time. That is no longer the case. So losing the NBC affiliation isn't as meaningful as it was back then when, when Channel 4 lost it.
I just have to say, I still think it has some meaning, though. And I know you asked Dan, but let me just say what I think they should do. I think they should become really think about being hyper-local in a serious way, really having some community connections and bringing in something nobody else is doing to pump that up. Now, if they're going to do that, then they're going to have to stop doing what they did a weekend ago, which is ripping off stories from the Press Pass TV, the young youth corps that did a story, and then they took it and didn't acknowledge them. What you want to do is build community so that you can have those constituencies come in and fill out that hour. That's what they're going to have to do.
I was thinking new technology has made network affiliation much less important. And frankly, we may simply see an NBC channel that is not affiliated with any local station emerging on the wide array of channels that we have. And I think that might be, sort of a sign that we're moving away from affiliation.
When Randy Price left recently, we'll leave it at that. He was saying that one of the problems is that Channel 7 is going for news that is even less local. So I think that the direction that you're talking about, Callie, is exactly what they ought to be doing, but I think they're running in the other direction. So how well that's going to do at 10 o'clock is another thing. Ed Anson may feel like he wants to do counter-programming, but he's up against Fox 25 at 10, which is a huge success. I would think that Jay Leno would work better as counter-programming than simply competing head-to-head with the Channel 25 News.
He's also up against NBC as an entity. I mean, not just the president of NBC, but Jeff Zucker. He's up against GE. I mean, ultimately is what we're talking about here. And, the fact that this is the 7th largest market, they're not going to want to give it up in terms of ratings. I mean, this is an important part of calculating how well Leno is doing. So
maybe it's time for the networks to change their model. PBS does things a little differently. PBS stations carry PBS programming, Frontline, Nova, Arthur, but PBS does not dictate the time slots. They just offer up the programming. So you still get a ratings, but it's not hour to hour to hour the way it is at the networks, and maybe it's time for them to rethink.
And by the way, I still go to Channel 7 for CBS.
I've been doing that for 15 years.